The world before the flood is one of the most mysterious and fascinating themes in the Bible, a time when humanity experienced a reality vastly different from the one we know today. The Bible gives us glimpses of this period, revealing a world of unexplained creatures, giants who walked among men, and a spiritual rebellion that had devastating consequences for God's creation. This dark time reveals the depths of corruption that invaded the human heart and serves as a warning about the importance of leading a righteous life devoted to God. As we understand what the world was like before the flood, we are inspired to live with self-control and seek spiritual strength, knowing that our faith in God is what protects and sustains us. After the creation of the world, God looked upon everything He had made and saw that it was good. The earth was a place of peace, and humanity lived in communion with God. However, this initial harmony was interrupted when sin entered the world through Adam and Eve's disobedience. From that moment, corruption began to spread, and the effects of sin became evident. Humanity, created in God's image, began to live under the influence of a fallen world, and the human heart drifted further from God's original purpose. As time passed, the Bible tells us that people multiplied on the earth, filling the world. But unfortunately, instead of growing in righteousness, they grew in wickedness. Sin, initially just a small seed, had now become a tree of iniquity with deep roots and branches spreading everywhere. Violence, immorality, and injustice began to dominate humanity, leading it further away from God. It was a time when human hearts freely embraced dark desires, and society seemed to lose itself in the pursuit of pleasure and power. In this context of growing corruption, something even darker occurred. Fallen angels, known as the sons of God, descended to earth and mingled with humanity. The Bible mentions that these spiritual beings, captivated by the beauty of human women, defied God and took wives from among them. This act of disobedience had unimaginable consequences, as the union between fallen angels and humans gave rise to a lineage of giants, known as the Nephilim. These giants were powerful, imposing beings, unlike any other creature in creation. They symbolized the physical and spiritual corruption that had taken over the world. These Nephilim, or giants, were known for their strength and superhuman abilities. They were famed warriors, known and feared by all. Yet their presence on earth did not bring blessings. Rather, it only contributed to the increasing corruption and violence spreading among men. They became symbols of rebellion against God and the fallen nature of the pre-flood world. This period in history reveals how sin can multiply in surprising and tragic ways, leading humanity further from the divine plan. The presence of these giants and the influence of the fallen angels not only corrupted the physical world, but also caused a spiritual distortion. The fallen angels were not just interested in fulfilling their desires, but also in destroying the human race, created to reflect the image of God. They introduced idolatry, magic, and other sins, leading humanity to worship false gods and completely turn away from the true God. This period was marked by spiritual darkness, where truth was twisted and evil was exalted. The world before the flood was filled with inexplicable creatures, beings we can only imagine today, but at that time, they were real. There was a diversity of creatures and beings that coexisted with humanity, but also bore the marks of the corruption that had spread through creation. The creation, once perfect, was now tainted by sin, and even animals and plants were affected. Nature seemed to reflect the state of moral and spiritual degradation that had overtaken the world. Seeing such wickedness, God observed the corruption and violence that consumed the earth. His heart was saddened to see how humanity had strayed from His purpose and how the world He had created with so much love was now dominated by destruction. But even in this darkness, there was a man who remained faithful to God, Noah. The Bible describes Noah as a righteous and blameless man in a wicked generation. He found favor in God's eyes because he chose to live in obedience, even when everyone around him had surrendered to evil. God decided it was time to cleanse the earth and destroy the corruption that had spread. He revealed to Noah his plan to bring a flood, a catastrophic event that would destroy all life on earth except those inside the ark he instructed Noah to build. God gave detailed instructions for constructing this ark, an enormous vessel capable of housing Noah, his family, and a pair of each animal species. The ark would be a symbol of God's salvation, a refuge for those who chose to obey and trust the Lord. Noah's obedience is a testimony of faith and determination. He began building the ark at a time when no one had seen anything like a flood. His faith was tested by the scorn and disbelief of the people around him, who did not understand his mission. But Noah remained faithful to God, diligently constructing the ark day after day, following every detail God had commanded. He knew that destruction was imminent and that the only hope for salvation was to trust God and obey his instructions. Finally, the time came, and God ordered Noah to enter the ark with his family and the animals. When everyone was safely inside, God closed the door. Rain began to fall, and subterranean waters broke through the surface, flooding the earth. The flood was a catastrophic event, wiping out all life outside the ark. The Nephilim, the fallen angels, and all who had corrupted God's creation were destroyed. The earth was cleansed, and evil was swept away. This event reminds us of the seriousness of sin and the consequences of disobedience to God. The flood was a way for God to restore his creation and give humanity a new chance to live according to his purposes. However, it was also a warning for all future generations, showing that God does not tolerate sin and is just in his actions. When the flood ended and the waters began to recede, God commanded Noah and his family to repopulate the earth. He also made a promise, sealed with the rainbow, that he would never again destroy the earth with a flood. This promise is a reminder of God's mercy and his love for humanity, even after a period of such corruption and destruction. Noah and his family became the new representatives of humanity, and from them, the world was rebuilt. The story of the pre-flood world teaches us many valuable lessons. It shows how sin can spread quickly and how rebellion against God brings severe consequences. It also reminds us of the importance of living in obedience and maintaining our faith in God, even when everyone around us chooses different paths. Noah was an example of integrity and faith, someone who chose to obey God, even when it meant going against the tide of his time. In a world where we are constantly tempted to follow paths of pride and disobedience, the story of the flood challenges us to remain faithful to God and seek his righteousness. We are called to live according to God's will, to turn away from sin, and to strive for a life of purity and integrity. The flood was a demonstration of God's power, but also of his mercy, as he preserved a lineage for humanity to continue and, one day, for the plan of redemption through Jesus Christ to be fulfilled. As we look at the pre-flood world and see how far humanity had strayed from God, we are reminded to be mindful of our own choices and attitudes. The story of Noah and the flood teaches us about the gravity of sin, but also about God's faithfulness to those who obey him. Just as Noah was saved by his faith and obedience, we are called to live in accordance with God's commandments, trusting that he will always care for those who seek him. May we reflect on this story and apply its lessons to our lives. May we live with self-control, vigilance, and strength, knowing that God calls us to be a light in a world that often chooses the path of darkness. And like Noah, may we find grace in God's eyes, living in obedience and faithfulness as we await the fulfillment of his promises. 2 of 2.